Welcome to episode 67 of No Rares Required. The Arena Open is coming this weekend, so this week is going to be a double episode, and I'm going to be taking some time off, so I'm going to try to get through as many of the archetypes as I can before I leave. And I hope you've been enjoying the standard content, but I also like playing limited, and I think it's the best way to collect all of the cards in a new set. So every week I will be covering the top performing commons and uncommons for a draft in a color pair or archetype that you vote on each week. So the top two this week were Azorius or white-blue, and then Simic or green-blue. And so the theme for Azorius is detectives, and it is definitely accurate. There are a lot of detective synergies, and a lot of them do better the more that you have. So you're looking for ones like Inside Source, Private Eye, Perimeter Enforcer, and Projector Inspector. These are all detectives that get better the more detectives that there are. And then there's filler detectives like Granite Witness, which has nice tempo, and Market Watch Phantom, which gains flying, that are also good for just evasive threats. So as far as removal goes, I tend to lean towards the counter spells that are available, like Reasonable Doubt and No More Lies, to disrupt my opponent's answers. And then I prioritize taking the white cards early, since I think you have to fight harder for that color than blue. And then, so with that, let's get into the cards individually, and when I think you should look to take them during a draft. So first, I like to calculate the total wins created. This is the first time. What I do is I take the average of the games played win rate and the game in hand win rate on a tracking website called 17 Lands, and then I subtract the average win rate of all of the users in the archetype and multiply it by the number of games played. And this is a nice way to kind of filter out for skill differentials and just what is working for the average person. And we can see the top of the list here is Private Eye, which is the Signpost Azorius uncommon. We've got Novice Inspector, which is the 1-drop that spawns a clue token. Ezram Agency Thief, which is the 5/5 that can get hexproof or lifelink or vigilance, but you have to sacrifice a clue token, but it spawns 2 when it comes in. It's just an absolute bomb. Makeshift Binding, which is the enchantment removal in white. Perimeter Enforcer, which is the 1/1 flying lifelink detective that works particularly well in this archetype because it gets +1/+1 whenever a detective enters the battlefield. Inside Source is the 1/1 that spawns a 2/2. Cryptic Coat is the cloak card that gives you an unblockable 3/2, and then you can bring it back to your hand and play it again. Keeps cloaking stuff. Granite Witness is the Azorius disguise creature that can flip up and tap something or untap something. Steam Core Scholar is the 2/2 Wind Drake that draws 2 cards, and then you could discard 2 cards unless you discard a sorcery. Market Watch Phantom is the... Wait, did I must have misread that. Oh yeah, no, Market Watch Phantom is the 2/2 that gains flying. Neighborhood Guardian is the one that gets +1/+1 to a target creature until end of turn when something 2 or less enters the battlefield. Projector Inspector is the 3/2 that draws a card and then discards a card whenever a detective enters the battlefield. Exit Specialist is the disguise creature that can bounce something. Wojak Investigator is the 2/4 flying vigilance that gives you a clue token if your opponent has more cards. Aurelia's Vindicator is the 4/2 ward 2 lifelink flyer that exiles when you undisguise it. And then Escape Tunnel is the evolving wilds that can make something with 2 power or less unblockable. Now, if that was a little too fast for you, don't worry, we'll be going through most of those again, just very quickly. And then as far as the total wins destroyed, you can do the same calculation, but what's been hurting the archetype the most. And we can see Drag the Canal, Make Your Move, Gravestone Strider, Vigilante, Case of the Shattered Pact, Atrada, War Leader's Call, Ranger Captain of Eos, Crime Stopper Sprite, Forensic Gadgeteer, Public Thoroughfare, Detective Satchel, Agency Outfitter, Sudden Setback, Forensic Researcher, and Fayflight. So, there's a couple of cards on here that are splashes, so like the War Leader's Call, Atrada, Drag the Canal. This set doesn't splash particularly well outside of being base green. So you're going to want to focus on still just being blue-white. And then there's a couple of traps in here like the Crime Stopper Sprite. This one doesn't do the collect evidence particularly well. The Forensic Gadgeteer is the 3/2 that has like clue token synergies, if I remember correctly. Public Thoroughfare for splashing, Detective Satchel for splashing. Agency Outfitter is the 4/3 flyer for 6 that can go grab the magnifying glass and the top hat. And both of those haven't been particularly great. Sudden Setback is the 2 double pip blue that bounces something back to your opponent's library. Forensic Researcher is the 1/3 detective that can collect evidence for 3 and tap something of theirs and untap one of your permanents, so you can use it for ramp. That's another one that like just doesn't work very well, like the Crime Stopper Sprite, because you don't have a lot of collect evidence. And then Fayflight is the +1/+0 and hexproof, and you already have some pretty good evasive threats. So you're going to focus on just really early pressure, less so collect evidence synergies and not splashing. And then, so next what I do is I take the wins created and I divide them by the number of times that the card was picked. And this allows me to kind of sort through, and then I graph this against the average taken at and fit the data with a logarithmic regression. And this allows me to look at the best cards at different time points within the draft. And we'll call this value over replacement, thanks to Karl, aka 2duck_cubed. And so we can look at the top cards that take at different time points within a draft. So the higher up this card is on the list, the more value it has over other cards in this archetype. And then the closer it gets to 0, the more it could be replaced with a different card. So the number one reason to be in this archetype is definitely Ezram, Agency Chief. This is the 5/5 flyer that can that spawns 2 clue tokens. And then if that wasn't enough, you can give it Vigilance, Lifelink, or Hexproof by sacrificing an artifact and tapping 1 colorless. So absolute bomb, no surprise there. Cryptic Coat is one that we're going to see in every blue deck. When it enters the battlefield, you cloak the top part of your library, or card of your library, and then the equipped creature gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked. There's no equipment cost, so it's always going to be attached to that creature. And then you can return, for 1 in a blue, you can return it to your owner's hand. It leaves the cloaked card on the battlefield, and then you can play it again. And this is particularly useful if they kill your cloaked card. You just get this recurring threat unless they destroy the equipment. Steam Core Scholar, like I mentioned, is the Windrake, the 2/2 flying vigilance that when it enters the battlefield draws 2 cards and then discards 2 cards, unless you discard an instant or sorcery, or a creature card with flying. Forgot about that. Aurelia's Vindicator is the 4/2 flying lifelink ward 2 that disguise for X 3 and a white to exile X target creature cards from the battlefield and or graveyard, and then when Aurelia leaves the battlefield, return the exiled cards to their owner's hand. Great bomb. Wojek Investigator is the 2/4 flying vigilance for 2 and a white. At the beginning of your upkeep, investigate once for each opponent who has more cards in hand than you. And then Intrude on the Mind is the instant speed. You make 2 piles. You either get a 5/5 flyer and draw 5, or you like make a 3/3 flyer and draw 2, make a 2/2 flyer and draw 3. And so there's some really cool interactions with this. And the fact that it's instant speed means that you could often eat something of your opponent's that's attacking in the air. And then we've got 10th District Hero, which is the 2/3 human for 1 and a white that can then turn into a 4/4. And then if you do the 2 and a white to collect evidence 4, it turns into a 5/5, and other creatures you control have indestructible. This card can run away with games. And then we've got Alquist Proft, Master Sleuth, which is the 3/3 vigilance for 1, a white, and a blue. And when it enters the battlefield, investigate. And then you've got X, a white, and a blue, sacrifice a clue, you draw X cards and gain X life. Now, if the game goes super long, that can be relevant. Most of the time, this is just a 3/3 vigilance that enters the battlefield and investigates, and that is perfectly fine. So now we're really into the thick of it. Is picks 2.5 through 5 are you've opened up your bombs, or maybe you missed your bombs and you got bad rares in your first pack, right? So now you're looking for like direction, and this is where what uncommons, what busted commons are you looking to pick up? And this list is so long in this archetype, and in general, because of how many rares there are, it really extends how much is in this list, that this is going to take a little bit to get through, which is why you can tell I'm kind of going quickly, right? So we've got Private Eye, which is the Signpost uncommon. You get a 3/3 for 1, a white, and a blue that gives other detectives you control +1/+1. You're really aiming to have a high amount of detectives in this archetype. And then whenever you draw your second card each turn off of a clue token or projector inspector, then target detective can't be blocked this turn. So it gets that unblockable damage, which is kind of a sub-theme within like the escape tunnel and the cryptic coat. Then we've got the Perimeter Enforcer, which is the 1/1 flying lifelink that whenever a detective enters the battlefield, or when a detective is turned face up, Perimeter Enforcer gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Works very well in this archetype. Novice Inspector is the 1/2 that spawns a clue token. Makeshift Binding is the 2 and a white enchantment that exiles target creature and opponent controls, and then you gain 2 life. Exit Specialist is the 2/1 disguise. Flips up, and it bounces a target creature to its owner's hand. You can do your own for interesting ETBs. A lot of times you're just going to use this to punish your opponent for undisguising their creatures and then having to play it again. And then Exit Specialist can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater, still going with that detective unblockable sub-theme. Prof's Eidetic Memory is there's a really amazing curve here in Rare, or at the Rare level, where you do Prof's Eidetic Memory into the Steam Core Scholar. So when you play it, it enters the battlefield, it draws a card, you have no maximum hand size, and then at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you've drawn more than one card, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature, where X is the number of cards you've drawn this turn -1. So with the Steam Core Scholar, you're going to be doing a +2/+2, so the more that you're drawing before you can go into your combat phase, the better, and this works particularly well in this archetype. Neighborhood Guardian, also really great white common or uncommon that you're going to want to see. They're going to take this one highly because it does go really well into like Celestia and Boros and basically every white deck. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn, which synergizes nicely with like Dogwalker, Inside Source. There are a couple of creatures in white specifically that flip and have multiple cards coming into the battlefield that spawn. It would give you the +2/+2 instead of just a +1/+1. So a lot of early pressure. Inside Source is the 1/1 that spawns a 2/2 detective and then can tap for 3 colorless and tap it to give +2/+0 and vigilance to target detective and activate only as a sorcery. And this one is one that you're not really going to use a whole lot. I think I've seen people using it instead of developing the board, and it's usually a mistake. And then Fuss and Bother has been particularly impressive in any of the go wide strategies. So this one isn't going as wide as Boros, but it's still got the white cards that spawn multiple bodies like Dogwalker and Inside Source, so it's always an option. And then what's nice about the set is that because everybody's playing disguised creatures, everybody's playing the 2/2 ward 2 creatures on 3 colorless. A lot of times you're attacking into like a fleet of 2/2s into a fleet of 2/2s, and then if you use Fuss, you win all of those combats, and then you have a +3. Then you have 3/3s that then all flip and keep the counter when they flip. So I've been really impressed with Fuss. And then if the game goes super late, Bother can be a good way to do it. Surveil 2 helps you dig to additional threats, and then the 1/1 flyers can often be too much evasive threat for your opponent to deal with. And then we've got Market Watch Phantom, which is the 2/2 whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield. Market Watch Phantom gains flying until end of turn, so this is a grizzly bear that then becomes an evasive threat. Lost in the Maze is a rare enchantment for X, a double pit blue with flash. When it enters the battlefield, tap X target creatures, put a stun counter on each of those creatures you don't control, and then tapped creatures you control have hexproof. That one is particularly relevant because it protects your private eyes as long as they're attacking and being like unblockable damage. You want to keep them tapped, and then they'll have hexproof so your opponent can't use the removal. And then also this works similar to the Out Cold, is just a good way of tapping your opponent's stuff and winning on the tempo battle. I mentioned that splashing doesn't work particularly well in this archetype, and I stand by that. There is one exception to the rule, and that is Coerce to Kill, because this is an automatic 2-for-1. You enchant a creature that your opponent controls, you control that enchanted creature, and then it has base power and toughness 1/1 and has Death Touch. So you're eliminating a threat that then they have to use removal, and it can chump block something and trade with it. So I've been very impressed with Coerce to Kill. And then Surveillance Monitor. This one is, again, like the evidence collection is a little bit hard to do compared to some other archetypes, but you're still getting the detective synergies and a 1/1 Thopter artifact creature token, so it's worth playing. And then Hedge Maze, there is worth noting that the splash for green can be advantageous depending on what rares that you pick up. Specifically, Vanifar tends to be a little bit undervalued, so I think that one's sneaking in the list there for that reason. And then we've got Dogwalker, as I mentioned, is 3 cards in 1, so works particularly well. And there's no detective synergies, and it is double pip white, so it's not going to work as well as it does in Boros, but still a pick that I'm looking to take up. Case of the Gateway Express is removal into an Anthem. Once you've attacked with 3 or more creatures, creatures you control get +1/+0. So this one is just a really great card. And then Not on My Watch, I think, is a little bit undervalued right now. And being able to tap 1 in a blue or 1 in a white to exile target attacking creature works really well in the race. So it depends on how much you're attacking and your opponent's attacking, and if you're blocking. Because if you get it to the point where you're attacking into your opponent's creatures and they're not attacking you, then this can be a dead card. So it kind of depends on what your archetype is trying to do. I've found personally that a lot of the matches come down to playing your cards and not really blocking, and so a lot of the opponents aren't blocking either, and so you're just taking turns attacking one another, and then Not on My Watch works particularly well. And then as far as like value over replacement for picks 5 and onward, this is really like how overdrafted is the archetype. And you can see this is like not as bad as Boros, but it is starting, like the white is starting to disappear. So top of the list here, we've got the Granite Witness, which is the 3/2 flying vigilance that can disguise turn face up to tap or untap target creature. So don't forget that you can use this to snag, like create a tricky blocker. And then we've got Projector Inspector, which the more detectives that you have, the better Projector Inspector becomes. And it's amazing in multiples because then you get several triggers off of all of your detectives that you're playing, and you can really dig for your bombs. And then Auspicious Arrival, +2/+2, and Investigate. Similar to Boros, I like Auspicious Arrival, and like the combat tricks specifically that spawn clue tokens work really nicely because you get in for the damage, or you get a trade 1-for-1, and then you get up in value because you get the clue token. And then, as I mentioned, Escape Tunnel works particularly well, even if you're not splashing, because you can give a disguised creature unblockable, and then undisguise it to get a large amount of unblockable damage through. Then Cold Case Cracker is a 3/3 flying detective that when it dies investigates, and there's just enough detective synergies to want to play the Phantom Monster, aka the 4-cost 3/3 flyer. And then as far as like what cards can you plan on wheeling, there are 3 that I look to wheel, and they are Reasonable Doubt, which is the counter spell, counter target spell unless controller pays 2, also known as a quench. The nice thing about this is you can suspect up to 1 target creature, so not only are you affecting their tempo, but then you get to make something of yours into a better attacker. And this can be a really nice card for kind of helping increase your draw win rate and lower the win versus play versus draw discrepancy, because this is better when you're on the draw. Your 2 untapped mana matches up with their 3, and then 3/4, right? So counter spells tend to work better when you're on the draw, and I like to include them for that reason in this archetype. And then same with No More Lies. This one is counter target spell unless its controller pays 3, and then if the spell is countered this way, exile it instead, which works particularly well with the large collect evidence spells. The split cost spells are particularly nice to get exiled so they can't be used for evidence later. And then we have Unauthorized Exit, which is the return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand and surveil 1. And there are a lot of really good enter the battlefield effects, but usually you can find a way to make this work. So if it's either bouncing another like 2/2 token off of an inside source, or if you're using it on something like a Riftburst Hellion that they sunk 9 mana to flip, being able to put that back into their hand and have them do that again is a way to go way up in value. And then the Surveil is also nice for fixing your lands and fixing your draws, or finding those threats later in the game. So tomorrow I'll be covering the second archetype, which was Simic, and tomorrow there will be a poll for the next archetypes, so I'll be covering the next 2 next week as well, so remember to cast your vote. And if you're playing in the Arena Open on the weekend, let me know how you did. I love to hear your guys' stories. You can either talk to me in my Discord, the link is in the video description, or you can leave a comment below. And every Friday, I publish a best of 3 sideboard guide. Every Saturday, a 50-match summary in best of 1. And then every Sunday, a standard meta review. And Tuesdays tend to be my draft guide for the current set. So remember to hit like and subscribe for near daily Magic the Gathering content. And thanks for listening and being a part of my community. Good luck with your games and future trophies. And thank you all for the support. I'll see you tomorrow.